Let's take some time to explore what triggers guilt tripping, especially when it's something you might be doing to others. Now, this isn't always easy to look at. It takes real courage to be honest with yourself, to reflect on how your actions might affect the people around you, and to ask the hard questions. But if you're here and listening, you're already taking that step. And that's something to feel proud of. The truth is, guilt tripping doesn't usually come from a place of wanting to hurt or control others. More often, it's something we fall into when we feel vulnerable, overwhelmed, unsupported, or unsure of how to express our needs. It becomes a kind of defense mechanism, a way of protecting ourselves when things feel emotionally uncertain or when we're afraid our needs might not be met if we ask directly. So let's look at some of the most common triggers. These are the things that can prompt guilt tripping without us even fully realizing it. And by learning to recognize these moments in ourselves, we can start to shift how we respond and how we relate to others. One major trigger is feeling unheard or overlooked. Think about a time when you put in a lot of effort, maybe at work, at home, in a relationship, and it just wasn't acknowledged. You gave your time, your energy, maybe even made sacrifices, and no one really noticed. That kind of feeling can build up, and if it's not spoken about, it can start to leak out in passive or indirect ways. So instead of saying, "I'm feeling a bit unappreciated," it comes out as, "I guess no one notices what I do until it's gone." That's a guilt-laden message. What you're really trying to say is that you need to feel seen and valued. But instead of opening a space for connection, that kind of statement often shuts people down or makes them feel blamed, even if that wasn't your intention. When we feel overlooked, it's completely valid to want that to change. But the most powerful way to invite change is through honest, direct communication. You can say something like, "Hey, I've been putting in a lot of effort lately, and I've been feeling like it's gone unnoticed." It would really mean a lot to hear some appreciation now and then. It might feel awkward at first, but it's clear, and it gives others the opportunity to respond in a way that builds connection rather than tension. Another common trigger for guilt tripping is feeling unsupported or alone. This often shows up when we feel like we are carrying too much, doing everything ourselves, and no one is stepping in to help. The emotional weight of that can be exhausting. So, we might start saying things like, "It must be nice to just sit there while I do everything." Again, the feeling behind that is real. You probably are overwhelmed, and you do need help, but the way it's being expressed creates guilt rather than understanding. When you express your needs through frustration or sarcasm, it puts the other person on the defensive. They are less likely to help and more likely to feel attacked or misunderstood. But if you can recognize the trigger and pause, you can say something more effective, like, "I'm feeling really overwhelmed right now. Would you mind helping me with this?" It's a simple change, but it makes a big difference in how the conversation goes. Now let's talk about insecurity and fear of rejection, two deep emotional triggers that are often at the core of guilt tripping. This one's harder to admit, but it's very common. Maybe you've had the thought, "If I ask for what I need and they say no, what does that mean about me? Maybe I'm not important. Maybe I'm not loved." That fear can be so uncomfortable that we avoid it altogether. Instead of saying, "I'd really love your support on this," we say something like, "If you really cared about me, you'd do it." Those kinds of statements often come from a place of fear. They are designed to avoid rejection by making it harder for the other person to say no. But even when people do say yes in response, it doesn't feel great. You might get what you asked for, but it feels hollow because it wasn't freely given, it was pulled out through pressure. When this kind of fear shows up, it's helpful to ask yourself where it's coming from. Are you assuming that if someone says no, it means they don't care? Are you equating someone else's response with your value as a person? If so, that's a good moment to stop and remind yourself, your worth isn't defined by whether people meet your requests. Your needs are valid, and expressing them directly is not only allowed, it's the healthiest way to build trust and connection. Now, recognizing your triggers is a powerful step. But what do you do with that awareness? The next move is to pause when you notice those triggers coming up. When you feel the urge to drop a guilt-laden comment, take a breath and ask yourself, what am I really feeling here? What do I actually need? That small moment of reflection gives you the chance to shift your response. You might realize you're feeling anxious, overwhelmed, or just craving reassurance. And with that clarity, you can speak in a way that's direct and kind. You might say, I've been feeling a bit invisible lately, and I just want to feel more appreciated. Or, I'm finding it hard to manage this on my own, and I could really use a hand. Or even, it's hard for me to ask for this because I'm afraid you might say no, but I want to try anyway. These statements are vulnerable, yes, but they are also authentic. And people respond to that. It creates room for mutual respect, rather than defensiveness or guilt. The more you practice this kind of communication, the more natural it becomes. It might feel shaky at first, especially if guilt tripping has been your go-to strategy for a long time. But over time, it gets easier. And the benefits are huge. You'll start to notice that people actually want to support you. That you're not relying on pressure or emotional cues, you're building real connection based on honesty and trust. And perhaps even more importantly, you'll begin to feel better in yourself. When you stop relying on guilt, you create more space for self-worth. You reinforce the idea that your needs matter, and that you can express them clearly, confidently, and respectfully. So, as you move forward, try to keep this one question close. Is what I'm about to say coming from fear or from clarity? That little pause, that small check-in with yourself, can change the entire tone of your relationships. Recognizing your triggers is such a powerful first step. You've started to uncover the reasons why you might lean on guilt when you're feeling vulnerable, unheard, or unsure. And now, you've got a foundation to work from, one rooted in self-awareness rather than shame. But of course, awareness alone isn't enough. The next part is about what you do with that awareness. How do you respond differently, even when your instinct wants to fall back into old habits? How do you replace guilt tripping with something that actually builds connection, rather than damaging it? That's what we'll be diving into next in the upcoming module, Breaking the Cycle of Guilt Tripping. We'll explore practical tools and real-life strategies to help you shift those patterns in a lasting, meaningful way. You'll learn how to communicate more openly, set healthier boundaries, and build relationships where your needs, and the needs of others, can be expressed with respect, honesty, and care. You're doing something brave and powerful by being here, and every bit of reflection you've done so far matters. Keep going. This is where change starts to take shape, and you're absolutely capable of making it happen.